Hey and welcome to this dungeon tanking building guide. Necro is in my opinion one of the best classes for tanking. It has absurdly high damage mitigation thanks to Spirit Guardian and Disdain Harm, incredible ultimate generation through necrotic potency and corpse consumption, which also creates a really fun gameplay where you have to manage corpses, ridiculous heal especially against many foes with Hungry Scythe, and many other useful skills and passives. Let's start out with gear. The options on the left are the options which I consider to be the best. So for example with Yolnacrin, Turning Tide and Crimson, I consider Yolna to be the best, then Turning Tide and then Crimson. The same goes for traits. It doesn't matter for weapon types since there is no difference between sword, axe, dagger and mace. So I consider Yolnacrin to be the best set in this case because of how easy it is to proc, you simply have to taunt. Then on the second place it's Turning Tide, which might even be better option than Yolnacrin if you're playing with less experienced damage dealers, so the trash will die slow enough you'll have to time to actually proc it. Crimson Oath is a good option if you're playing with damage dealers that run medium armor, because they will need the additional penetration. I like to run Spolder of Ruin because any other monster set will be very hard to proc on the run. Then you have one piece left on your head slot, so you can run either Magma Incarnate for additional recovery, or Trainee for additional max health. On your backbar set you wanna run Olorim, also because of how easy it is to proc on the run. You simply have to throw Caltrops and then swap to your back bar. And on your front bar, Void Bash, which will allow you to stack the adds way faster. If you're running with a healer, you can ditch Olorim and use Crimson Oath instead. In boss fights, the order changes a bit. Here, Turning Tide is the best and Yolnacrin is a secondary option. Again, my preferred option for head and shoulder is Spolder of Ruin and Magma Incarnate, but you can also use Nazara, which will be way easier because it won't reduce your recoveries like Spolder does, and also it will prolong debuffs like Minor Brittle or Major Maim, making the fight way easier for you. On backbar, my preferred option is Olorim. If you have a healer in group, you can switch it to War Machine, and once again, if you have damage dealers in medium armor, you can also run Crimson Oath. On your front bar, you wanna use Puncturing Remedy set for its ridiculous healing and armor bonus. You have to make sure that your backbar stuff in setup for bosses is infused. About enchants, you don't want to use triple reduced cost glyphs, because most of the time your only stamina skill will be Pierce Armor, so instead you want to use Magicka cost reduction. But having 3 Magicka cost reduction glyphs with the Arpeggios Mundus is an overkill. You literally won't be able to spend your Magicka while spamming skills. So the options here are either you keep the triple Magicka cost reduction and you use a different Mundus stone, or you get rid of one of those and slot block cost reduction instead, because Necromancer has really bad stamina sustain. I've also prepared this setup with only crafted gear, for people who are starting their adventure with tanking and don't have any of the better gear yet. Let's take a look at skills now. Pierce Armor, your melee taunt that also applies a lot of penetration. Next one, Razor Caltrops, is the skill you wanna use to begin fights with. It's an AoE that will slow down your enemies and constantly apply Major Breach. Next, Necrotic Potency, a skill that will allow you to suck ultimate out of corpses. Next one, Reverberating Bash, the skill you will need to proc Vateshran Sword and Board. And the last skill on your front bar, Hungry Scythe, your self-heal. On your back bar you wanna use Beckoning Armor, a skill that will grant you Major Resolve, constantly pull in adds that attack you. It will also create a corpse, which you can use Necrotic Potency on for ultimate. Silver Leash, so you can pull enemies into the stack. Pulsar, which will apply Minor Mangle to all enemies around you, reducing their maximum health by 10%. It will also apply Minor Brittle, increasing enemies' critical damage taken by 10%, apply Minor Protection to your allies, decreasing their damage taken by 5%, and it will also synergize with your next ability. Elemental Blockade, it's a skill that will grant your allies damage shield against projectiles. It will also snare enemies hit by your Pulsar. And the last skill, Inner Rage, your Wrenched Taunt. That was set up for trash, but it's gonna change a bit against bosses. Spirit Guardian is a skill that will decrease your damage taken, heal either you or your allies, and generate a corpse that you can use Necrotic Potency on for ultimate. Overflowing Altar is a skill that, when placed, will constantly apply Minor Lifesteal to surrounding enemies. Attacking an enemy afflicted with Minor Lifesteal will heal the attacker. Overflowing Altar will also grant your allies a synergy that will heal them for 65% of their maximum health. Destructive Clench is a skill that will apply major maim to your enemy, reducing their damage done by 10%. It is also guaranteed to apply Chilled status effect. Chilled status effect will also apply minor maim, reducing your enemy's damage done by another 5% for a total of 15% reduced damage done. It will also apply minor brittle, increasing your enemy's critical damage taken by 10%. If a boss fight doesn't have any adds you'd have to chain in, you can drop Silver Leash and instead use Empowering Grasp, which will increase your allies' damage done with light attacks. If boss's mechanics make it difficult to utilize Empowering Grasp, for example because your allies have to stay away from you, you can instead use Stalking Blast Bones. It's a great ability for generating corpses for your necrotic potency. When fighting against a difficult boss with lots of incoming damage, you can instead use Revealing Flare, a skill that will passively grant you major protection, decreasing your damage taken by 10%. Ultimates. On your front bar you wanna use Temporal Guard, a skill that will passively grant you minor protection, reducing your damage taken by 5%. It will also grant you access to Concentrated Barrier passive, which will grant you damage shield while blocking. Another ultimate you could use on your front bar instead of Temporal Guard is Reviving Barrier. It's an ultimate that will grant your allies massive damage shield and heal them. It will also passively increase your magicka recovery while slotted. On your back bar you wanna use Aggressive Horn, which will increase your allies' maximum resources and grant them major force, increasing their critical damage done by 20%. Now I'm gonna mention a few other useful skills, because you'll have to adapt to some fights. Immovable is a skill that will massively increase your block mitigation and grant you immunity to crowd control effects, but it will also slow you down by a lot. Crushing Shock is a ranged interrupt. Expunge Modify is a skill that will remove negative effects from you and grant you resources for each effect cleansed. Champion points. In the blue tree you wanna grab all the damage mitigation slotables, which are Duelist's Rebuff, which reduces your damage taken from single target attacks, Enduring Resolve, which reduces your damage taken from damage over time attacks, Ironclad, which reduces your damage taken from direct damage attacks, Unassailable, which reduces your damage taken from area of effect attacks. In the red tree you wanna grab Fortified, which will increase your armor, Celerity, which will increase your movement speed, Boundless Vitality, which will increase your max health, and Rejuvenation, which will increase all of your recoveries. For boss fights you wanna swap Celerity to Bracing Anchor. If you don't wanna swap CP between different encounters, just stick to Bracing Anchor, though you might have issue catching up with the rest of your group. Race. Necromancer doesn't have any passive bonuses for armor, so it's much harder to reach armor cap on this class, which is why the race you wanna use will be Nord. Their passives are Resist Frost, which increases your max health and frost resistance, Stalwart, which increases your max stamina and generates ultimate, and Ragged, which increases your armor. Another reason why Nord is the best race for a Necromancer tank is because 90% of the time in trials you will be using Saxsteel set, which will scale better with Nord's ultimate generation passive. Food. The food you wanna use is Orzorga's Smoked Bear Haunch. It's a food that provides max health, health recovery, stamina recovery, and magicka recovery. You can obtain it from a questline in Hrothgar that starts in this place, though it's a bit expensive to craft. There is a cheaper alternative, which provides slightly smaller amounts of the bonuses and also doesn't have the health recovery, but it's a mostly redundant stat, which is called Jewels of Misrule. You can obtain this recipe from the Jester event, which ended recently, so you should be able to buy the recipe relatively cheap. Attributes. I always put all my points into health, though if you're playing as a race that provides bonuses to maximum magicka, you will have to put some points into stamina to make sure stamina is your higher resource, so that synergies restore stamina instead of magicka. Munduses. As mentioned before, your munduses will depend on your jewelry enchants. If you went with 3 magicka reduced cost glyphs, you can use the Lady Mundus, which will increase your armor, which is hard to come by on a Necromancer. If you went with only 2 reduce magicka cost glyphs, you should go with the Mundus, which will increase your magicka recovery. Potions. The main potion you wanna be using will be the Tristat, which you can craft by combining Columbine, Baglos, and Mountain Flower. There is a better potion, but it's very expensive, so only use it when doing content that you really care about. It's a heroism potion and you can craft it by combining Columbine, Dragon's Blood, and Dragon Rheum. Tips. You wanna start the trash fights by throwing caltrops and then swapping to your bugbear. Then you wanna range taunt all the dangerous enemies and throw elemental blockade. After that, swap to your front bar and proc Vateshran Sword and Board with Reverberating Bash. Swap to your bugbear again, cast Pulsar, and after that, melee taunt the toughest targets to make sure their armor is properly penetrated. It is important that you don't immediately bar swap after casting Destructive Clench. It's because Minor Brittle can only be applied when you're wielding an ice staff, and if you bar swap right after casting Destructive Clench, the projectile will reach the target when you're on your one hand and shield bar. Another important thing is that you can recast your corpse generating abilities after half of their duration has passed, and that will generate the corpse early. So for example, Beckoning Armor lasts 20 seconds, and it will also generate corpse if you recast it after 10 seconds have passed. Spirit Guardian lasts 16 seconds, so it will generate corpse if you recast it after 8 seconds. That's everything I have to say about Necromancer. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask in the comments, and if you want to see more of my tanking content like guides, trifecta achievements and world records, feel free to subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.